Hey guys, this is Tamika. Today is August 13th, 2012, and it is approximately 9:15 p.m. I live in the state of Georgia. Today was the first day of school for my kids that are going to the Fulton County Public School System. And this message that I'm recording is for those parents that have kids with autism. My son, who is now 9 years old, just recently started talking when he was maybe like maybe 5 or 6 years old. What happened was over the summer, when he was smaller, I would say when he was 2 weeks old, my son stopped breathing. He was really, gone. He was blue already. He had already started turning cold, all because, he had stopped breathing. I noticed it when I was washing dishes one day, and he was in his bassinet, and I had him downstairs with me, but he was closer to the stairs, while I was way over, maybe like 20, 25 feet away at the sink washing dishes. So something just told me, like, look up, look over at him. And when I looked over, I saw his little arms just going. And I'm like, what is he over here doing? Maybe he's playing. So I walk over to his bassinet, and I see that he had a little spit bubble on his lip. And I'm like, okay. I picked him up, and I noticed that he was fighting because he was trying to gasp for air. He couldn't breathe. So his dad, who was upstairs bathing our daughter, I immediately ran upstairs with the baby in my arm, and I was like, help me, help me, help him, help me, help him, because he can't breathe. And he's like, okay, okay, you even here. And he tried, he's rubbing his back, he was patting him in his back. He could not get his breath for nothing. That's when I started seeing his eyes even turning, blue or purple around here. All of this has started changing colors. And I kind of panicked in a way, but immediately I ran downstairs and I hit the alert button for the ambulance on the alarm on our home alarm system. But I guess, being that I was in a panic mode in a way, I couldn't get it to work. So I ran over, got the telephone, and I dialed 911. Of course, it seemed like it takes, when you need them, it seems like it takes them forever to get to you. But I want to say at least maybe 7 to 10 minutes had passed, and they still hadn't got here. So my then husband ran out the house with our son in his arm. He like, I'm taking him to the hospital. And I'm like, you cannot drive a stick shift with a baby in your arm to the hospital, which was maybe like 15 minutes away. But when I looked outside out the window, when I was on the phone with 911, she's like, "Where are they?" And I'm like, "They're outside." And she's like, "Well, what are they doing?" I'm like, "He's leaving to go to the hospital." She's like, "Don't tell him not to do that." So once I looked outside and I saw my baby laying in his arm limp, I'm like, "Oh my God, no, please don't." But I still can panic because I know, and whatever the situation is, God is in control, and whatever God will is, His will be done. And I was pretty sure that whatever it was, that He was going to make me strong, to get through whatever it was. But it was still this calm voice that said, "You know what? Don't worry about it. It's just a test of your faith." So once I seen that, I maybe like a minute, 2 minutes later, my husband at that time came back in the door, and our son was in his arm, but he was breathing, and I'm like, "Oh my God, what happened? What did you do?" He like, "I put my mouth over his nose and his mouth, and I gave him 2 deep breaths, and he passed gas." He said, and then he just, started coughing and gasping for more air. And I'm like, thank you, thank you, thank you. But by that time, the fire department had also came, and they checked him out, and his oxygen level was below 100. So they sat here and they gave him oxygen and stuff. And eventually he was hospitalized maybe like a couple of days later, so they can run all these tests, and it turned out he had sleep apnea, where he would forget to breathe. um, so they gave us this machine that we was to take around, hook him up to. And once this machine, the alarm goes off on this machine, that means he stopped breathing. So we probably didn't get any sleep at all. I think my son was probably like 3, 4 years old when he stopped sleeping with, in the bed with us. But it was all good because we wanted to make sure that he was okay. Anyway, Now, today was, like I said, today is that first day of school. He's back in school. He is in special needs classes because he doesn't have this strong speech. His speech is not that strong. It's still not fully developed where he's talking like how you and I would talk. But anyway, make a long story short, when 5 years old, like I said, he wasn't talking. He had said some words by the time he got two, but then everything just went downhill when he just stopped talking, period. And I'm like, well, what is it? I took him to the doctor and they're like, well, is he deaf? I'm like, no, he's not deaf. And I said, well, every time I say something to him, if I call his name, I say, he looks at me. He doesn't say anything, but he looks at me. And they're like, that's strange. So they ordered all these tests, and that's how they came up with, the diagnosis that he had autism. And I'm like, well, okay, what does that mean? So, they will, we're going to help you. There's, doctors that's there to help you with occupational therapy, speech therapy, any kind of therapy that you can name. Those doctors were there. So I immediately started him into those. And, at one time they said, well, start teaching him sign language. Like, yeah, sign language will kind of, make him depend, solely on sign language. And I didn't want that to happen. So I'm like, after I taught him a few things, the basic, hey, how are you doing? I'm sorry. I'm hungry. I'm thirsty. I want water, etc. All that stuff, the things that he needed to know to communicate. But over the summer, he got out of, I think he was probably in pre-K or kindergarten. When he got out, I said, you know what? I'm going to work with him. And I said, you're going to start talking. And I said, if you don't start talking, you're not going to get whatever it is that you want. You're not going to get it. Period. So, one day he was asking me for stuff and he was pointing at stuff. That was his way of communicating. He would point at everything that he wanted. And you just had to, go through the things. You want this? Is it this? Is it this? Until he said, shake his head in agreeing with you. So, one day he asked for something. I'm like, well, what is it? He would get so mad at me, like he would be pissing mad. And I'm like, well, you're going to say something. So I would make him watch me by telling him to focus right here, focus on my mouth. And when he wanted something, if he wanted ice, if he wanted water, I would make him say it. And I'm like, look, water, really breaking the word down and moving my mouth slowly so he can understand exactly what I'm saying and the way my mouth is moving as well. So eventually, after working with him all summer long, he did get it to where he was saying like small words. By then, I was amped because I'm like, yeah, we're making progress. You're going to talk. And it didn't bother me at all if if I didn't take that step, because I know eventually he was going to start talking, but I wanted him to start now. I didn't want him to depend on anything else to help him communicate. I wanted him to build up his nerves, build up his confidence, build that muscle in his tongue that was kind of lacking or lagging so he wouldn't talk. So, once I heard him say a couple of words when he was like 2 years old, 2 or 3 years old, I knew then that he had the capabilities of talking. It was just, he need to learn over, the way to move or work his muscles in his face and his mouth and his tongue to actually to say the words that he wanted to say. So after that, he was in school still. The teacher probably called me once. Well, not once. This one teacher called me like so many times. Like he's not eating. He's having temper tantrums. And, regardless if he's autistic or not, mom's going to discipline you if you act up. So, after she would call me maybe like, oh my God, I want to say every day. So, one day she called, she's like, well, he's throwing chairs. I'm like, he's throwing chairs. I'm like, what? So I work maybe like 30 minutes away from the school. I live less than 3 minutes away from the school. So I left my job. I told this teacher, I said, well, you hold on. I said, I will be right there. By then, being that she had called me so many times, I was kind of fed up with, her having to call me about his behavior, because I send my kids to school to get an education. Therefore, you sit your butt in your classroom, regardless what the situation is. You sit in your classroom and you learn. If you don't learn, you do not hinder anybody else from learning, period. So I get to the school and I'm like, okay, I peek in. I'm like, okay, I see you. I peep in. I see you. doing something, and all of a sudden you see me, he freezes up. So he knows better. He knows what he's doing. He knows the difference between right and wrong. So I told his teacher, I said, do you guys have a bathroom or a restroom anywhere close by? She like, you mean like adjoining the classrooms? I said, yes. She like, no, we don't. But there's one in the hall. I'm like, no, I don't need one in the hallway. I said, you know what? I said, let me borrow him. I'll bring him back in like less than 10 minutes. So I left. I told the front office, I'm like, I'll be back. He's not checking out. Leave his lunch on his desk. I will be back. I took him home. I spanked his butt, and I have not had to, well, as of today, and that was what, in kindergarten, first grade, I have not been back to his school about his behavior, period. Um, Even though he's autistic, he's in special needs classes. He does the same work that the kids in mainstream do. He makes straight A's, and he knows his mom does not like, frowny faces. So all things had to have an upside down frown, which is a smile. Um, he reads before he could even really speak good. His favorite book was a dictionary, the kids dictionary. So he would go through there. He would learn how to spell all these words. Um, he's a visual learner. If I give him a DVD, a history DVD, a mathematics DVD, a phonics DVD, which the phonics DVD is what really helped him to, he taught himself to read by looking at the phonics DVD. But whatever he see on those videos, he would keep it in his mind, and he would learn it that way. So you don't have to teach it to him once he learns it. And another thing that he does, he likes to look at other people. Like if you're skating or anything, and he think that's fascinating to him, he looks at that and he learns. And he look at you maybe like 5 minutes, and then he's like, okay, I'm gonna try it. He just get out there and do whatever. And he's really, really good. So to all the people that that lack the knowledge about kids with autism, if you would just read up on it and learn that these kids are very, very smart kids. I think most of their issues lie in like their social and their social skills, and maybe their speech. Like on my end, it's their speech. Some don't like loud music. My son really didn't like loud noises at all. As soon as we walk into the movie theater, he would just cover his ears because it was so loud. But he's better now. But if you can pick up a book, look at a movie, learn about these kids, learn more about the condition, or learn about more about the diagnosis, period, before you pass judgment. Even when you're in the grocery store, you see a child that's acting out and the parent look like they're not doing anything. Don't be so quick to judge, because I was one of those parents at one time, like, oh, if that was my child, I'll be down on the floor with him. But until I had my own child that had, little issues that was going on, it's then what I had to understand, don't judge a book by its cover, because you never know the story behind why a person is doing what they're doing, or why a child is acting the way they're acting. It's not just because they're bad kids. There may be issues going on with those kids. So don't pass judgment so fast, And also, don't try to treat them any differently than you do other kids, because they are kids. They want to be treated the same. They do not want to just be pampered and catered to. Teach them. So I hope this message have reached some of you guys, especially parents that have kids that are, that are diagnosed with autism. I hope it gives you a little light. Don't give up on your kids. Don't let anybody tell you that your child would never be able to do something. If your child want to do something, you put your best foot forth, and you push your child, and you help them to get to that point. So until next time, guys, I will talk to you later. Good night.